Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
WCAT Radio presents Just Plain Theology from Rome, Sweet Rome, with Natalia Eugen. This is on location in Rome is Natalia. So welcome back, Natalia.
Hi, Bob. Thank you. Greetings from the Eternal City. How are you?
And I understand we're going to play today, huh? Or we're going to study about play.
We're going to talk a little bit about play, and this is fittingly will be a pleasure. And I think it came to me to talk about this today because we're in the midst of exams. So we, last week, this week, and next week. I'm right smack in the middle of them all, and so all of us are studying feverishly. And I had two, Friday. I have two today. I got another one in the week. Okay, fine. We have some study sessions in between, and you're just working. You're working, and you've worked before, but now you're really going crazy. So I talked to one of the seminarians today. It was we were comparing notes about how we become hermits, the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure that's most of us, And I just sit in the apartment and your room or wherever you are, and you're studying. I have emerged basically to go to church and to get some groceries if I need them, and it's about it. Occasionally I come up for air, take a breath, go out in the balcony, and come back. Okay, and that's it. So it's just an intense time because you're going over the whole semester and you want to make sure you do well and you didn't forget anything, and you sometimes you don't know what to expect, and sometimes you do, and even then you start kidding yourself saying, well, maybe it won't be like I think, and and then you think, you get to the exam and suddenly there's a moment where you blank out. Now after you've been studying all semester and you think, did I even study anything? It's like suddenly there's nothing, and of course it comes back and you should just settle down. But that horrible moment is like those dreams that you have when you're a kid. Do you remember those? You'd be at school taking a test and you realize it's a class that you were supposed to have attended all year and you hadn't been once, and suddenly your whole future's riding on this exam for which you are absolutely not prepared. What a horrible dream. I had that kind of dream. We'll leave to psychoanalyzing that another time. So anyway, but did you know, Bob, there was a virtue about play? Did you know that?
Not really. I mean, I've thought about, things like that. But I did hear that word that you were using before we went on the air. Mm-hmm. And this person, when she told me about it, she was kind of kidding around, we got to do some eutrapelia. And I have no idea what that is, so maybe you can start there.
You're thinking, is that legal?
Yeah.
Sounds like someone, the uninitiated might sound like some sort of a controlled substance, But no. It's quite good for you. In fact, it should work to perfect you if engaged improperly and all of that. So yeah, I remember having looked into this a couple of years ago for another class, and I think the professor was sort of surprised that I did, and I just remember I love the word. It just sounds great. It's fun to say, Again, that's as it should be.
Let's spell it. EUT.
Yes.
RAPALIA. Eutrapelia.
Hold on. Let me correct the spelling because we have to be precise here. Okay, so it's EUTRAPELA. So that's how we have it come down to us in English from the Latin, which actually comes from the Greek, from a word trepo, which or trepein, which would mean to turn. That's one of the meanings there. So there's this idea of wittiness as a happy turn of mind. So this is the way St. Thomas talks about it. A happy turn of mind whereby he gives his words and deeds a cheerful turn. So it's a virtue. It's about games that can be both physical and intellectual. It's about that regulates fun and entertainment of a modest and innocent sort. So this even comes. It's spoken of in a section where St. Thomas is talking about modesty, about behavior and your comportment exteriorly. When he's talking about modesty, he doesn't mean so much clothes. It's more about how you are engaging with the world physically. How you walk about. Your movements. They should be dignified and controlled and all that sort of thing. So that's where this. Dress is part of it too, but I think the other part was more important. Today we might talk a little bit more about the dress part, but whatever. That's another.
Dr. Rhonda likes to play Scrabble.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
Oh yeah.
So great games like that could fall under that category.
Right. Exactly. So it could be any of that. So it's the pleasure in this play of games. It's an end in itself, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not doing it for another reason. Otherwise, then it's not about the virtue. It's about something else. So in the exercise of it results in a delight for the soul. And in that, nothing else is sought but this delight, this pleasure. And then the soul rests in that delight, So it's it's the most natural of things, and St. Thomas will talk about that later. Now, what I found interesting was that this has something in common with the highest of all the intellective acts, which would be contemplation. And for Thomas, contemplation isn't just the way we tend to think of it today, a kind of prayer where either you, in the acquired sort, where you're sitting before God and you're doing what you can do in the life of prayer. It's not also necessarily exclusively contemplation in terms of God giving you the prayer, the infused sort. It's not that, but what contemplation for him means often just studying. And for him, of course, studying is going to be theology. So, you're talking about difficult sometimes subjects, but with the highest object you could possibly have in mind, which is going to be God as first truth, and all that's involved in studying that. So, but that act of contemplation, the studying, and this pleasure that is supposed to aid that by giving you relief from the toil, are related in that they both are looking for pleasure. They share this end of this delighting in.
Did you start practicing? Did you start practicing that then?
I've told myself that I have to do some of that here. Now, I haven't done a lot, but today I did after my exam. I felt, I met up with a friend of mine from the university who also had an exam, and we had some time to kill. So we took a nice long leisurely walk to the places we had to go. And so it was wonderful to just be outside, and we were just sort of, joking around and talking and chatting, and it was sunny and the weather warmed up a little bit. And so there was a great deal of pleasure in that and like that. So it wasn't strictly play, but there was some of that involved. And so that's the best I could do today, so we'll see. As the week goes on, it might get easier because the exams will be over. And like that.
Would going to a movie, would that count?
Depending on the movie. Okay, depending on the movie. So now St. Thomas will give you some cautions regarding the exercise of this, right? So the pleasure that's to be sought should not be indecent or it shouldn't be indecent or injurious words or deeds. So, it depends on the movie, let's put it that way. One must not lose balance and sobriety of mind and behavior. So it's not the kind of silliness that makes you, lose absolute control of yourself. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't have, the kind of hearty laugh where you can barely breathe and your stomach is aching. It's okay. But, it doesn't necessarily mean you've lost all sobriety. So there's that. And then also there must be a certain appropriateness to the activity, appropriateness in terms of the persons involved, the time and the place. All these things, must apply, and prudence is involved in this. So, it's not just a complete going mad, but and it shouldn't be indecent and all that. So sure, a movie, why not? And it depends on the movie, but presuming that you're going to be you're living a virtuous life, you wouldn't necessarily want to go see something that was, not decent or whatever. So
what about studying now? Do you have any particular tricks that you use or
tricks? If only tricks work. You know what works? Just hard work, actually. What works is applying the mind. Well, I mean, everyone's got different ways of doing this. For me, it depends on the pedagogy. It depends on how the class is taught. Now, a couple of years ago when I was studying in Austria, all the classes were seminar method. Many times at this level in the United States, you'll have the same thing, where seminar meaning you've got a smaller group of people. You're taking very often primary sources. You're reading whatever you're going to be discussing that day ahead of time. You prepare it, you come, and you discuss it. And the role of the instructor in that setting is to guide the discussion so that it doesn't merely stay on the level of the students, because we're there to learn, which means we really don't know anything about it or very little. So the teacher's got to make sure that the questions are guided such to elevate us and to deepen our understanding of this and make us think and all of that. It also can't, if you're doing a seminar method, you have to make sure that it doesn't turn into a lecture, which can happen to those who are more comfortable lecturing, because that's then you're receiving everything in. Not that the reception of it is a passive act, but you are a little bit more passive in that activity than you would be if you were engaging with it and discussing. So that's one way of doing that. So if that's the way the class is taught, then I find the best thing to do is you take the reading, and as the Dominicans might say, you eat the book. I mean, you go through it and you really assimilate it the way you would assimilate food that you eat, which means that you read it, you try and formulate in your own words what is being said. It's great if you have other students to speak with, about that and have your own discussion. That works well. Or just writing down someplace what the gist of what you've just read, or make some kind of notes or questions you have, notes, bullet points to bring up for the discussion in class. And I find that method of learning I found to be the most profitable for me, So that there's that. Now that's the way to prepare for that.
What's the most profitable way?
For me, what's been most profitable is that seminar method where you have, the smaller group of students, because you can't do that with 50 students. It's impossible. So, when you're in a school where you have that many, you do what you can. But once you get into the higher levels, the class size always gets down. And as you move on in your studies, you will have more seminars, and those are limited to 12 people. And so there is supposed to be discussion. And they can be very, very good. They still do need to be guided. So it's not as though the instructor has no role there, but not only the role of knowing the material and being fully capable, to lecture on it, but the ability to place him or herself in the shoes of the student who doesn't know all that the teacher knows, but to be able to put yourself in their shoes and say, well, what is it they need to know, and what do I hear that they already have grasped, and what will help them get to where they have to go. So it's not mindless at all, and it really takes a degree of empathy. St. Augustine talked about this actually in a work he did about catechesis, and ultimately what you have to do is love the students and be able, and in all charity, really, really have a love for students, and then put yourself in their shoes and say, what is it that they need to learn? What do I see? They're not going in this direction. Why? And how can I guide them there without spoon feeding them? Because we're supposed to be doing the activity. So that's for that method, and I find that's the one that works the best. Frankly, like I said, in a large group, it's simply unmanageable to have a discussion with 50 people. You just can't do it. So in that situation, you have a lecture, and you've got the professor who has prepared his lecture, and you're sitting there. And what do? For me, what's helpful is when there is some kind of a text that we have for the classes. Some professors give you textbooks that you can refer to either in the library. If you want to go purchase it, you can. That doesn't happen very often here. Well, I mean, not it. In the States, typically you purchase all your books and it costs a fortune, and you'll never, depending on the subject. I mean, with theology, you would think you'd want to keep them and build a library. Other subjects, you may not keep them so much if you're just doing your basic liberal arts education in the States. But that was always the biggest expense, was books. Here, it's not like that. So you have the library, and they take the books that are part of the bibliography for the course. They're in a particular section of the library, and you can go and access them, and you read them. You can photocopy chapters if you want, and that way you can take them home and, look through and make notes and what have you. So not every professor does that, but I find it works best when those texts not only are available in a generic way, or just generally they're available, but specific readings are going to be spoken of on specific days before the lecture. That is, to me, the most helpful way, because then you can really prepare and be completely engaged as much as possible in that kind of a learning situation. If the material to read is given after the lecture, I find that other things can get in the way after that, because you have other classes to prepare for, life gets in the way, or what you say, I'll get to it, and human nature being what it is. But, you do eventually, but now it may be a step or two removed from the lecture you just had, and it's not as fresh in your mind, so you have to go back over your notes. So, trying to get on top of those readings as quickly as possible after a lecture is key. Also is the notes from class. So in class, as the professor lectures, people take notes differently. Some people don't take a lot of notes, and they retain it because they're better in terms of learning orally. Others are more visual. Some like to take notes with bullet points, some just, for me, I just type, and I type very quickly, so I can type, and then for me, it's helpful. I can go back and bold things and search for things when it's time to prepare for an exam, but that's me. If someone doesn't type quickly, that would be cumbersome. Some people record classes and go back and just listen to them again. I've done that with some, and then I'll go back and fill in the notes, and that relieves the pressure in class, because you don't have to take everything down at that moment. You can also just listen and engage that way. So those are the ways of doing it. So in most of the classes I've had here in Rome are the bigger classes where there is a lecture. What I find most difficult is if the professor is giving the lecture, but there's no text specifically for the course. Like there might be a bibliography, and you can pick through it, but you may not know what the professor liked in that book unless he tells you. Now, you can always go and ask. But like I said, for me, it's helpful to just have specific ones. And the best of all is when the specific readings are given to you, so that given to you in the sense that you can go to the bookstore and get the photocopy of all the readings and just have it there, and you can bring it to class. That's fantastic. So that to me is helpful to have that, and most helpful to have it before, so you can prepare going into the lecture like that. Is that long-winded enough?
Do you feel that all the professors love you?
Well, I can't judge hearts. Not everyone is. Yes, they're giving us. I would have to say, I would imagine so. I assume so, because these are people very often. If you're doing this kind of work, you should be living charity. Now, not everyone can demonstrate it the way one might want to receive it. Boundaries have to be kept. But apart from that, people are just different. Not everybody is able to express what's there interiorly, and so fine. And yeah, the greatest love that teachers show their students is when they've prepared, right, for the class, and they're thinking of you and what you need, because they're there to form your intellect, and in this case also what you're learning intellectually is forming your soul. So there's a lot riding on them, if you will. And so yes, I would say so. The ones who are they're preparing and they care and they answer questions, and they'll be available for that, and like that. Yeah. So that's what a teacher is supposed to do. I mean, that work on St. Augustine is great. I've only had one professor from years ago make reference to it. And as I read it, I said, wow, this should be read by anyone who's thinking about getting up in front of a group of people and trying to teach them anything. But yeah, the idea that you have to, love the students and put yourself in their shoes and really have empathy for them. But again, not everyone can do that very easily and readily. And frankly, someone can have great mastery of a topic. And if there isn't that obvious empathy for the student and some basic sense of caring for their development, even on the affective level, with all appropriateness being observed. If you don't sense that, that's a block for students, I mean, it just is. When you know that a teacher has love for you, it opens up a world. It really does. That they truly care about this, not only intellectual formation, but the formation of your soul in the process. In this context, for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember reading about a professor at Loyola in Chicago, and he was traveling around the country at various colleges and universities giving talks. And then he came back home, and the final talks were to be delivered at Loyola. And he was thinking to himself, well, I wonder how I'm going to do, how am I going to look and so forth, with my colleagues here. And then God reminded him, he said, now look, you're going to be talking to some of these men who are in their 80s, they're old, a lot of them will be older. And you have to remember to give them what they need.
Right.
Not what you need. So I thought that was a tremendous piece of advice for a professor, and that's what you've been talking about, saying that
right.
They have to want to make sure that they give you what you need to learn and so forth, right?
Right. And what they have to give us is the truth, because there's no reason to ever believe anything unless it's true. That's why you believe something. You need the truth, and God is first truth. So we have to be led to him through this. We have a more direct route by studying theology. But that's what they have to give you. They have to give you the truth. And now somebody who isn't necessarily good in their delivery or, what have you, but maybe very loving, could lead someone to pursue things on their own, right? And then you can have the opposite case where someone may not be able to express that. Maybe I may not even have an interior sense of that themselves. They still may be a very good professor, And in fact, you may even also have a very good professor who's got some wacky ideas, I mean, it doesn't seem to be able to go together, but I mean, I had one once who had some, ideas that were dogmatically creative. Let's be kind, it was just not. But he was a great teacher. I mean, his pedagogy was good. That skill was there somewhere along the line. But the thing is that, you want, what's ideal in learning is to have someone who's teaching you, who you can utterly trust, because you're opening yourself up to this person intellectually. Your mind is there to open up, to receive what is being given. Whatever energy you have to expend, put up filters and constantly critique, I mean, not that you don't critically, but if you realize that you're not sure about where this person's taking you and there isn't trust, that puts up a real block, and it costs you mentally, because it's energy wasted there that you should be free. There should be a sense of freedom and trust with the teacher that what you're receiving is truth. And so I can understand when people get concerned about going to study at universities, Catholic kids, that they're the time to go to college, and they're worried about going to a secular university or whatever. Now if you're studying a subject like biology or something, then you're safer because it's empirical, it's right in front of you, not dealing with a lot of theory. Whereas if you're getting into subjects of sociology, anthropology, or psychology, or anything like that, then you have to be more discerning, and that's where somebody could be, a little bit more skeptical about going to some place that doesn't have at least some kind of doesn't at least respect the Christian underpinnings of things. But the thing is that the university system was started by the Catholic Church, and so when you have now these universities, in the secular world that can't even tolerate a difference of opinion, and that they look down on this faith of ours is absurd, because if it wasn't for Catholicism, you wouldn't have the university system, that grew up in Paris in the 1200s and 13th century. It's just, you wouldn't have had it without the church. And so to disdain the church and speak of believers as those who have a vice on their mind, as it were, blindly following, a dictate from a far off prelate. That's just simply not the case. In fact, the theological virtue of faith is going to illumine and expand your mind. It's not going to put it into a box that is, 12 sizes too small, as it were. It's not going to put a vice on it. It's not going to cramp its style, if you will. It won't shrink it. It's going to illumine it. It's going to have you move forward and go. You'll be able to grasp more. That's the opposite of what people think, whereas they think it's going to constrict you, and it doesn't. Faith. So there's that. But that's.
I interviewed a student recently that transferred to Holy Apostles because she said going through attending a secular university, she said all they dealt with was matter. They did not deal with your soul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
we're not going to want to talk about the soul. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. No. I think it's a fairy tale or something. It's absurd. But but they. Mm-hmm.
What about professors now? Do you find there are some professors that mark harder than others that mark easier?
Some have that reputation. Some classes are just by nature more difficult. And so it is going to be more difficult, and they also have to be more exact, more exigent in terms of grading, because there are subjects where you need precision in thought, and it just may be more difficult, and others may be more of an introductory course, and so it's not as necessarily as demanding. You may not be meeting for as long, and so while they will grade you, what you need to know, it depends. Everywhere you go, you're going to have some professors are just stricter about that, and some less so. Some don't want you to have any anxiety about learning at all because they find that that's a block to learning. Others, that's not an issue. You just here you go. You just got to learn it, and it's difficult, and that's it. And you've had the class, and there you go. I haven't had the kind of horrible negative experiences here, so I don't have that story to tell from my experience here in Rome. So that's good. But yeah, some are always going to be more tough than others. That's just the way it is.
All right. So you said today that you were at St. Mary Major.
Yeah.
You went to Mass there?
No. No, I didn't go to Mass there. I went here in the neighborhood, but I was leaving school, and I love that church. I just love, it's a papal basilica, but it just feels homey compared. You would never imagine using that adjective to describe a basilica, right? Papal basilica. But there's something about that church that that just draws me. And, it's a church dedicated to Mary as the Mother of God. And it was built in her honor, especially after the council at Ephesus, when that title was conferred on her. Conferred. There wasn't a decree that was sort of set out. It was more like that the title was accepted. It was based on a Christological debate that had to do of Christ's two natures and what kind of union there was. How do you speak of that union of the two natures? Because you had, the Patriarch of Constantinople at that point, Nestorius, who was not wanting to use the term Theotokos, which means we translate it in English, in Latin, say Mater Dei, in English, you're going to say the Mother of God. It literally means God bearer, the one who bore God. In the end, you're pointing to the same thing. But that title was problematic in those days because, for Nestorius anyway, because he was taking it to mean, he was thinking that would be a way of possibly saying that, you're generating divinity from a creature, and that's impossible. And so that was just difficult, but it had to do with the union of the two natures in Christ, in the one divine person. So anyway, at least that, but the devotion, see, this is the interesting thing about the faith of the people, that had already a devotion to the Blessed Mother under that title in the East. And even going back to the 2nd century, there's a old prayer, possibly the 2nd century, called Sutum Presidium, and it's a beautiful Latin chant that has that prayer. That is the prayer and the chant. It's ancient, and her title is in there. And we still even use that term in the East, in the Byzantine Rite, for the English translations, or not even, in the Greek you're going to hear it. Sometimes in the Slavic, not so much though. We use another word, Bohoroditse, which means the same thing. And so that title then was sort of given the okay and the go-ahead. So this basilica was built. So it's ancient, it's going back to the 5th century, and you've got these mosaics in the back that date back to this time. It's not only beautiful, but it's such a testimony in stone, to her importance in salvation history and how connected she is with all of this. She's the divine motherhood is vital to everything else we've come to know about Mary in terms of her being ever virgin and the dogmas of the Immaculate Conception and her Assumption. All these things stem from the divine motherhood. It was a divine action that happened in her, and that's the source of all of this. It's the divinity, it's the power of the Holy Spirit overshadowing her, like the Shekinah glory cloud, and she's the Ark of the Covenant. That was the type, and here she is as the Ark of the New Covenant. Going into that church reminds me of that, but the fact that it's that old, not from the 1400s, but from the 400s. It's just astounding that so much of that, a lot of that structure is still there. The mosaics are still that old. It's beautiful. The other wonderful thing about St. Mary Major is they have, I don't know if we talked about this once or not, but they have Dominicans there, known as the Canons Penitentiary. They're the confessors, the so-called professionals. I forgot what term they go for, if it's a 3-year term or just a year. I can't remember. I'd have to look up again. But they're there from 7 o'clock in the morning until about lunchtime. Then, of course, there's a break in the afternoon, which is sacrosanct here, absolutely. But then they're back in around 3:30 until 7, and they're in the box, and they're hearing confessions for all the pilgrims that come, and they're there all the time in various languages, and it's just a beautiful witness, and they must have wonderful stories about people who come back, because let's say someone's been away for years and years. We're talking, 10, 20, 30 years. And suddenly they find themselves in Rome in this church. You wonder about the graces that are given there, and how, and one who might respond to that and see, here's a confessional in my language, my mother tongue, whatever it is, and all you have to do is just go. They don't know you. You're going to be leaving. It's the easiest possible way to reconcile with God, right? The kind of resurrection of the soul for one who's been away that long, where that charity's been killed in the soul, and because of sins of a grave nature, and the severing of the relationship. with God on your part. So easy to go there. And there they are. They're there just every day. There they are. Some of them have piles of books, because there may be hours when nobody comes. Or maybe you have languages that aren't, not as many pilgrims have them in Italy, but it might depend on the time of year. But still, beautiful, beautiful. So anyway, they also have a chapel there where they have Eucharistic adoration. And here you are in the middle of Rome, in a very busy area, and you can go into this chapel, and there's such quiet and peace. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And then, of course, below the altar, aside from the physical beauty, and, of course, beauty itself there substantially in the Eucharist, then you can go below the altar, and there they have the remnant of the crib, the largest, as far as I know, it's the largest remnants of what is believed to be the manger underneath there at St. Mary Major. And that's extraordinary. Go back and pray before that. Just beautiful. It's a wonderful church. It's wonderful.
Wow. Sounds great.
Oh, yeah.
You've been there a number of times, huh?
Yeah, because it's not far. It's it's close, and it's right here. And that, the other thing, I marvel sometimes you going into these places. Now, my experience here isn't going to last forever, and so I remind myself frequently to just remember where I am and where I'm going. So I'm in this basilica, and I'm thinking some people come here once in a lifetime, and they walk in, and it's a pilgrimage for them, and they bring some petition to the Blessed Mother, and here they are, and I can come here anytime, all the time if I want. It's very close to school. It's very convenient to get to, and there's a certain feeling there that it's not the same as going to the other basilicas. It's smaller. And it's your mother's house, God's house, but hers in a way, dedicated to her. And I love that. I love, even the pilgrims who come in, sometimes big groups come in and they're not always very quiet. But they're taken by something. You can see them as they walk around, And I think what I find interesting is when I see people kneeling at the confessionals and the tourists are walking by staring. I mean, sometimes they just stare like they can't believe people actually go to confession still. They really look shocked to see it, and they can't believe it. And then they don't know, am I walking too close? Am I going to hear something I shouldn't hear? But the looks on their faces are priceless. I wish I could make a montage of a video of them just looking and staring, because it seems like such a strange medieval practice to them, and you could tell that they really don't know what's going on there, a lot of them, especially those who just, if they're not even Christian, you don't know. I mean, so many people but forget about Catholics who haven't been catechized. You may have many people there who may not know about this at all. If they come from a Protestant community, then, they may have heard something about it. They don't know what it's all about. But for someone who hasn't even been baptized or not even Christian, it's such a foreign, strange, alien thing. You could just see it in their eyes. They don't know what to make of this at all, And it's one thing if the confessionals are open and someone is confessing face-to-face with the priest. But these are older confessionals, and I don't know. I should find out how old they are. I don't know. They've been there for a while. But you can kneel on either side for the anonymous kind, and that's the one that draws people's attention, because they just if they see someone talk face-to-face confession, they may assume it's a spiritual conversation. Maybe they're just talking it over. But when you see someone going to confession where it's the anonymous kind, that's when it's clear you're dealing with the sacrament. It's not just a chat at that point. They can tell. They know something else is going on, but they don't know what. That look on their face is great.
Getting back to adoration, the beautiful thing I like about adoration is that there isn't any language needed. You don't have to worry about, what language you speak.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I ran into a parish in El Paso that I was ministering to there, and they were all Hispanics, but half wanted to speak English and half wanted to speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, the ones who wanted to speak English, that's all they wanted to speak. And the Spanish ones just wanted to speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them where you can bring unity is at adoration.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's language is going to be a problem everywhere now when you have people coming from different places. Even with translations and stuff, it's always going to be a place of consideration for the other and difficulty and what have you. Yeah, right. You're right. When you're going to go before the Lord to prayer, the only language you need is love.
I remember one time, and I was in this little church. It was my parish, actually, a small church up in Upper Michigan. And I was sitting before the tabernacle. And the Lord said to me, he said, if I wanted to, I could have a little ray of light come out of that tabernacle right there. Mm. And everybody from all over the world would come to this little town of Hancock, Michigan. Mm-hmm. He said, I don't want to do it that way. He said, I don't want to do it that way. I want people to come,
Well, they have to come for love, and they have to come with faith. I mean, what you see in when someone goes to Eucharistic adoration and they see the consecrated host there in the monstrance, what they're seeing is not what's there, in the sense that the accidents of the bread are there. They're real. That's not a mirage, or that's not an illusion. They're there, but the substance is something else, which is why your senses fail you. So you must look with faith. So that is always going to be an obscure thing, and it's going to take trust, because faith has to do with the intellect, and the intellect is made for truth. And when the intellect doesn't have clarity, it's not happy. It doesn't like that, No. And if you don't have perfect clarity, if the intellect doesn't have perfect clarity, it's got to be sort of pushed forward a little bit by the will that's saying it's okay, you can trust this, And so to go to adoration is, yes, it's an act of love. It's an act of faith. It's an act of trust in God. It's belief. It's faith. You can't be there without faith. I mean, you can go in and the grace may come to you. That happened to somebody. I knew he was a Protestant man, and he went into a Eucharistic adoration. Well, it wasn't a chapel. It was a church where they had adoration all the time. And he walked in, and he had a physical difficulty, and he said he received a healing as soon as he walked in. Now, this is a Protestant man who did not explicitly have faith in the same things that in the things that the way the Catholics would formulate it. He would not say necessarily he believed in that explicitly. Now, he must have had some disposition where he was open to something. Otherwise, why would he have walked in? He wasn't there as a tourist at this church. He went in because there were sisters there, and so I think he had some kind of a relationship with the sisters. He was looking for something, so he had a proper disposition. So implicitly, there was something in him that said, he'll go where he's led. So his will was in the right place. And he says he received this physical healing of something that was medically verifiable, and there you go. So, but he went with a faith. You can walk in as a tourist saying nothing's going to happen to you necessarily. I mean, maybe,
Right.
I mean, I've had that experience, but not, it's an act of faith. It has to be, and you can't. You can stare and try and wrap your mind around this mystery, but it's always going to be mysterious and obscure, and there has to be that you have to look with the eyes of faith, and there has to be this trust and the openness to God and belief. You have to believe, and then love, and then allow to be loved in that exchange.
Did we talk about this last time about when the Holy Father, Saint John Paul II, or Saint John Paul II, came to the United States and wanted to go into this chapel and pray before he was going to give this talk at some seminary in New York, this was in Baltimore actually. Did we talk about that when they had a couple of dogs that they sent through the church to make sure there was nobody hiding or anything like that, you know?
Huh?
Was that on this show that I talked about that?
I don't recall. Let's hear it again.
What happened is that they sent the dogs around the church, and when they came to the tabernacle, these pointers who had been trained, to find people in explosions and things like that, where people were buried, they went right to the tabernacle and wouldn't move. They just pointed at the tabernacle.
Wow! Yeah. Oh, look at that! Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, it's amazing too. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to one of these sites where the Eucharistic miracles have taken place, and the species have stayed basically incorrupt. I went to. Have you been to one of those places?
Not overseas. I've seen some of that, experienced some of that here in this country.
So I've been to a couple in Austria. I went to one called a ski town called Seefeld, and then there was a Benedictine monastery it's called St. Georgensburg, and let me see, St. Georgensburg I remember more because they had the precious blood that had remained, and that's more unusual. And I asked one of the monks if he could, bring it. He was more than happy to, and they have a particular day that they venerate this. But that's miraculous, because the accidents that would normally be attached to the substance of the bread and wine, they're going to behave as they normally would after transubstantiation, and so when they're held in existence like that, miraculously, that's something too. That's amazing. There are a lot of those in Europe. There are a number here in Italy. I should make a pilgrimage also. There's lots of stuff I should do here. If I have time.
There was a Protestant man that I knew that in Indiana I met a few months ago. And he was a professional photographer, but I think he had done some preaching in the Protestant churches too. And he would drive by this little church out in Indiana, and every time he'd drive by it, the Lord will say, "I want you to go in that church." He says, "Me go in that church?" He said, "I would never go in a Catholic church." So a month later, he's driving by there again, right? And the Lord says, "I want you to go into that church." He says, "No, I'm not going in that church." And this went on for quite a few months. And finally, one day he said, okay. So he goes into the church, and he opens the door. And similar to the man you were talking about, he felt the presence of the Lord so strongly that he took off his shoes and he went to his knees. And the pastor came in and said, "What are you doing here?" He said, and that was the beginning of his conversion to the Catholic faith.
Wow!
Just like that.
It's just like that.
They had just finished adoration. They had the monstrance out on the altar, and there was some incense and so forth. So it was quite an experience for him. Like I said, that was a start, and he's a very strong Catholic today.
Well, after an experience like that, that's such a manifestation of God's love, in particular towards a particular person. How do you forget that when that kind of a change has been effected in you? You weren't going there specifically looking for that.
No.
But it doesn't mean that, though, that his will, wasn't in some way open to something,
Yeah.
because you can't be forced, but
No.
you certainly can be swayed and wooed, and
Exactly.
sucked off your feet, as it were, in terms of grace, So that can happen. But think about it. All that energy he spent saying no, 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 and then finally he goes. Well, he was open to something. He was willing to accept what God had for him there. He just didn't think it was going to be anything.
By the way, I was just looking at the news, and President Trump is going to name his Supreme Court justice appointment tomorrow.
Oh, well.
And he's not wasting any time, is he?
No, he's not. That's good though. This one's big. This is why a lot of people voted for him. It's this because
right.
this affects the United States for generations. What could happen? So it's important. And now that Scalia has passed on, to have someone like that there would be important. He was going to do a Thursday, last I read. I've been trying to keep up on that because it's been fascinating. I mean, from here, watching, wow,
By the way, did you ever hear the Scalia's son's homily at his funeral?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
And what happened was he started out by talking about this great man and what he did and what this and that and this and this and that. And everybody thought he was going to talk about his father,
Yeah.
This man was Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't like he didn't build up the man, he built up Jesus Christ. And he said, that's why my father was such a great man, because he was a follower of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
That's something?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So let's see, where are we? I think we're getting close. We got another 10 minutes, so I guess, or 8 minutes, something like that.
Well,
so what else were you going to talk about?
Well, we could keep on talking about Easter Paleo. We want more play.
Well, there is so much to talk about in the church, isn't there?
Yeah, there's tons. There's tons of stuff to talk about. There's always something. Like I said, my vision has become very narrow the last 2 weeks simply because of exams and whatnot. And so it's been just intense. It's been intense. But there's a joy in that, There's the joy of the intellectual appetite being satisfied by learning. This is when Thomas talks about this contemplation and the study that we're doing. This is about that, and our highest faculty is made for this. We're made to know the truth, and we're made to love. These are the two highest things in us. It's got an analogous relationship to the two processions in the Trinity. The procession of the Word, where the Son is eternally begotten, and the procession of love, where the Spirit is eternally spirated. In an analogous way, and what I mean when I say that is, you can say that there's some similarity, but there's more difference because God is ontologically other and all that. But even so, there's something about that those are our highest faculties, to know and our will and to love. That's an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, this pursuing this truth, it's a lot of work. And one of the reasons why something that can give you the highest possible spiritual pleasure, which is joy, why you would ever need a break from that, to me, was an interesting question. It's like, all right, if this, what we're doing, is supposed to give you joy, then why on earth would you need a break? Why should it exhaust you in any way? Why should you need a break? But ultimately, it just has to do with our physical nature. I mean, what's sensible to us is nearer, and in a way, it's almost as though it exerts a gravitational pull on us. And so to transcend that and to consider things of a higher nature is going to cost you, even physically, even though the intellect, the mind, does not need the physical organ to operate. But, you know, with our nature, it's involved because we're holomorphic creatures. And so you are working in a way, and so the physicality of us is involved in all in that. And it is tiring. So, and just, you know, even it's even in thinking, it's much easier to think about sensible things than it is to think abstractly. And so, for the same reason, so thinking abstractly, it's just more difficult than even receiving sense impressions from things. But that brings the greater pleasure because it's our highest faculty. And so when you're exercising your intellect, that's where you're going to find the greatest pleasure in terms of what it's made for, which is truth. And of course, when you're studying the truth about God, the highest object, God is first truth, that's nothing can be higher. So we have joy, which is why we can say that incorporeal creatures rejoice, have joy, right? Like the angels. You can say joy because we're not talking about it on the emotional level that's connected to our physicality. You're talking about with the intellectual part of it, meaning of our rational faculty. And so to think that you can have this in common with a creature that does not share your physical nature, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. But we need play. I found that fascinating. When I remember reading about it at that in the Summa, I was like, wow, it's necessary. It's a virtue. That's fantastic. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's great. You know, again, assuming, you know, you've got all it's a proper and appropriate and not indecent and all that kind of stuff. But it makes for fun. In fact, the more difficult the subject is and the more serious it is, then the more you're going to need it. You know, the more abstractly you're thinking, the more sometimes you just need a break. And even that change of scenery, that physical activity can bring after you've been doing all the intellectual work is important, which is why that wonderful walk today up the hill out in the sunshine, you know, feeling the air that was getting more mild was just so wonderful. You know, it's just the sheer physical pleasure of that was great. You know, and sharing some time with a friend and chatting and just being out and wow. And I realized, my gosh, I've just been holed up all week in here. Oh, my goodness. I probably should have gone out and had a gelato. There we go. That would have been.
I guess it can come under the heading of balance maybe too, huh?
Yeah, exactly. You have to balance out and be aware too of what you need and how much, and that takes prudence as well. You know, you've got to know your system. Not everybody has the same needs. You know, you can't prescribe the same amount of recreation for everybody or the same kind.
No.
You know, any more than you would tell two different people exactly how much and what they're supposed to eat. You know, that's up to them to determine what is best for them prudently, and all of that. So, you know, I could have gone out and had a small cup of gelato, but I didn't, because the best gelato place is around the corner for me. The best one in Rome. I'm convinced of it.
Gelato, it's like sherbet.
You know, people say it's the Italian ice cream. It's not exactly the same. It's the consistency is softer, and it's a different sort. They don't give you nearly as much of the humongous portions that we get in the United States. Being here now, but I mean, the difference. I remember going back last year. I think I was with my older sister. We went somewhere. I think it was Mystic Village in Connecticut or something. I can't remember. And we stopped somewhere and got ice cream, and I forgot the size of the ice cream cones, and I got the kid's size, and the thing was enormous, and I thought, I can't finish this.
No.
Unbelievable. But no, here, double dip. They're smaller, but
when you go back to what you were saying about, you know, when you're studying the truth, and I mean, these are the things that really make you happy. I heard a homily yesterday by Bishop Barron, you know, Robert Barron, and Word on Fire, talking about the Beatitudes and how these are the things that make you happy.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's
it's
right.
So beautiful.
Yep, and also where we're studying the virtues here, it's like, it's the life of virtue that will make you happy and will transform you and perfect you.
Right.
And that truth is lost. And I think all over the place, but even in Catholic catechesis, it's looked on as something boring and restricting. And it's not true. It liberates you.
And we're getting back to, sounds like, the way you talk, we're really getting back to our roots. Thomas Aquinas, I talked to a young man just a week or so ago. He said that he went to, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 years of university, and he never heard the name Thomas Aquinas mentioned all those years that he was there.
That's crazy because for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, he's the universal doctor of the church. There's nothing. I mean, there's even a mosaic icon of Thomas Aquinas at the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Cathedral here in Rome. So, it's okay to breathe with both lungs. On one side of it, there's this part. So he's the universal doctor of the church. Okay, and doctor because this is for all. Now, what is beautiful about Thomas also is that he takes what's best of the pre-Christian past philosophically, takes it, and it's not that he merely baptizes it. I mean, some things are reworked. They're conditioned by the Christianity that he has, but that link to the pre-Christian past and the philosophical truths that were valuable then, which were accepted by the church anyway.
We're talking about Aristotle and
right. We're talking especially metaphysics that were there because that gave us the language to develop Trinitarian doctrine and all sorts of others as well, but especially then. But for him, he conditions it in a way and presents it in this massive systematic work of the Summa, which was meant for beginners. I'm sure a lot of people find that funny. And that so to now go through a Catholic education, especially in the Western world, and not have this is crazy. It's depriving people of truth and of tools to discern.
And of course, this young man is one of those that is he's got a mission to get back to our roots.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
and
yes,
you probably will too.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what God has in mind.
Amen. Okay, we're out of time.
Wow, Bob, look at that.
Rome, sweet Rome. And we'll see you again next week, same time, Natalia Yuzian. And it was a pleasure again being with you. And you just continue to just do what you do and be the best that you can be. And it's going to be a lot of fun, isn't it, on this journey?
It is. So you pray for me during my exams and for all the students here.
All right. And for the rest of you, for everybody, God bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.